Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GC. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GC. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio/RV dining room, located directly inside America. Welcome back, folks of the interwebs. Once again, your host of Operation GCD, JJ Vance here, and more notably, perhaps, not the vice president. Anyhow, welcome back, folks of the interwebs. I will be your pilot and navigator for tonight's shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. And I got a real barn burner here on deck for you folks tonight. The Anatomy of Satanic Panic, Volume 4. Basically, the ongoing adventures, and what I mean by adventures are the ongoing psyop to mind war psychological operations, largely revolving around this character right here, old Muppet Mikey, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. And as we've covered a lot in the previous volumes here on our Thursdaze edition, folks, we've discussed his actions, his words relative to Satanism, relative to Crowley, relative to the darker aspects of these subjects, as well as his actions involving in the Phoenix program. One of Colby's queers, Bill Colby, former CIA director, that is, not commentary on their sexual proclivities, but the strange and odd nature these folks have impacted our society that we just still to this day can't quite understand. And part of that is due to these ongoing psychological operations. So we've unpacked some of old Muppet Mikey there, some of his statements regarding his psyops to mind war tactics and protocols compared to his own written statements and his own statements and interviews, and how he's doing this in an ongoing fashion. Basically established a call center script, if you will, you know what I mean, where these propagandists perpetrating Muppet Mikey here's satanic panic propaganda, they all hit the same highlights. Michelle remembers the landing report. Oh, McMartin's school, they don't have tunnels. And we unpacked a lot of that stuff last week with the tunnels and introduced more to another character in the mix, Ted Gunderson, former FBI. He thought he was going to be director. Yes, sir. We're live. We're doing it live, Twiz. And there we go. We're going here. Yes, sir. Apologize for my delays there, folks of the interwebs. So we see, Ted Gunderson, he's shitcoating the McMartin preschool situation, at the same time that they're digging them. He takes the parents out at the same time to dig the tunnels. We went over that news report last week. And I mentioned how Gunderson had infiltrated this whole McMartin preschool situation by shacking up with one of the single mothers in the mix. We'll go over more of her statements, how he was a freeloader, how, according to that lady, Jackie McGauley, he spoke, Gunderson, that is, to Michael Aquino every day. And that's an interesting statement. But we saw him go out there and shitcoat the whole tunnel situation because at the same time, a number of those parents, including Jackie McGauley, had hired that archaeological team to do a scientific study. So we see both of those activities on about the same time in 1990 with the McMartin preschool. So it's an interesting dynamic. We're going to introduce some more of Gunderson, old Uncle Ted, tonight. We're going to go back over some of Aquino's words relative to these subjects, and we're going to introduce more of the marketing angle. How did these things get perpetrated, right? So we're going to see some clips from Geraldo Rivera. He's a big figure in this mix. He did a blockbuster 1988 primetime special on all these matters of Satanism. We see Aquino and Gunderson on the same stage, in fact. So we'll go over some of those clips. And I think part of that is, they do one big special like that with Geraldo, this questionable character. We won't get into all those details tonight. We're just going to introduce him into the mix, but picking up, again, building from where we left off in previous weeks here, folks. And thanks again for joining me here, folks, of the interwebs, to get a little GCD, Muppet Mikey style, Satanic Panic, and these ongoing enterprises that, as we went over as well, not only these daycare centers having these satanic ritual abuse scandals in the high volume in the 80s and in the California incidents, it kept coming up old Mikey there with witness statements. And we'll go back into some of that statements with the Ukiah incident in California, right? The Army CID report even investigated some of that. The Army, Criminal Investigation Division, right? So Ukiah is an interesting spot because that was largely owned and occupied by the Jonestown cult, right? The Jim Jones People's Church, right? So it's interesting that those things would intersect. We're not going to get into too much more of that tonight, but we will revisit his involvement, Mikey, that is, right? As that 3.5-year-old at the Presidio identified him and then intimately identified the details of his inside of his home, furniture, decorations, because her preschool teacher, Mr. Gary, took her there, right? We went over those police reports. We'll see some more statements from old Mikey here, shitcoating that whole affair, blaming the victims, blaming everybody else, right? Look at some more of those CID reports relative to more things Aquino. Because it seems like, we have to evaluate his statements just like anybody else in this world, and Gunderson as well. I don't throw the baby out with the bathtub. Well, I think Uncle Ted was oftentimes shitcoating a lot of these things, and so does that McMartin mother that he did a real number on a victim's mother in the McMartin case, claiming to be a hero, in the meantime of doing all that other tomfoolery there. But it is important to consider the statements they do make and don't throw the baby out with the bathtub, I think. But with Aquino here, he talks out both sides of his mouth on a lot of subjects, right? We discovered that he has some dubious claims around when he started in his time in the Church of Satan, right? Again, his words, not mine. These are written statements he made. We went over some of that. We went over an interview he gave shortly before his death, bringing some of those things into question. In fact, let's listen to that right now. So, some of the statements he made, again, conflicting. And one of those other conflicting topics he likes to talk out both sides of his mouth on is being a Nazi. So, according to an Army CID report we'll look at, he would wear Nazi rank and regalia there on his military uniform underneath the lapel. Someone else did that famously. Mark Furman, now felon Nazi, former LAPD detective, disgraced one in that matter. Mark Furman committed perjury in the Orenthal James Simpson case, and that's the felony. And he, according to an internal affairs investigation that was going on at the time of that trial, when he testified in it, in fact, he wore Nazi rank underneath his lapel. So that's interesting. But let's, so while on the note, then when I say these folks talk out of both sides of their mouth, it is important to consider a lot of these subjects and complex nature in their totality, right? So I oftentimes, though, when I'm reviewing Aquino here and when I'm looking at some of these conflicting statements and then objective third-party investigations like the law enforcement investigation who took the report of that young girl on the Presidio who had all the details of old Mikey here's house and furniture and decorations, very unique details. And on top of that, she ran into Mikey here at the base PX, the Post Exchange, the store on the Presidio, and was frightened and knew his name is Mikey. So she said, her teacher, Gary, Mr. Gary. So we also find out him also claiming over the years he was never charged, Aquino, that is, in these matters. Gary Hambright was charged, dropped charges, and then dropped again charges. So it seems like Aquino had the same deal, according to FBI files and also according to Army CID records and according to Aquino's own lawsuit himself when he sued the Army to get some of these matters removed from his file, right? He admits himself that he was charged at one point. So that's interesting. So when we consider these things, I'm oftentimes reminded of another man who spoke out of both sides of his mouth. And I think he said cocaine was a hell of a drug.
Right in our eyes as he grinds this mud.
See, I never just did things just to do them. Come on, I mean, what am I going to do? Just all of a sudden just jump up and grind my feet on somebody's couch like it's something to do? Come on, I got a little more sense than that. Yeah, I remember grinding my feet on Eddie's couch.
So that's basically Michael Aquino, especially when he's like, "Oh, we don't do Satan stuff," or I don't do Crowley stuff on military time. I don't do magic stuff on military time. And then, according to Army CID reports, he's doing Nazi Crowley stuff over in castles in Bavaria, doing rituals on Army time, NATO time, I believe it is. He admits in his own book that he's doing all sorts of Crowleyan rituals on military time with the PSYOPs command for the Army Special Forces, one of Colby Squares. So, and again, he likes to shitcoat a lot of topics, him and his old buddy Ted. According to, again, Jackie McGauley, the mother of the McMartin victim that old Ted Gunderson infiltrated into her house and, kind of helped ruin that whole investigation and affair. the whole circus, helped contribute to the circus surrounding it. Because here today, folks still talk about, are there tunnels? Again, it's on the Satanic Panic call center script. Michelle remembers landing report. Oh, McMartin. Oh, wait, let's see. McMartin. Oh, tunnel. You believe in tunnels? You're a moron. But here's the deal: that archaeological dig, funded in part by Jackie McGauley, was done at the same time that old Ted there, Uncle Ted, that is, took a bunch of parents out there from McMartin with some shovels. So, and that's the one that stuck, not the archaeological report that's been public since 1993. So, and yet we still have documentaries. We still have podcasts today saying, "Oh, McMartin tunnels, you must be a moron." So, and again, we look at all these shit-coded matters of Aquino and his conflicting statements and whatnot. And then in that interview we reviewed last week, right before his death, from a show called, I think it was the Michael Decon program. Anyhow, there's not a lot of interviews with Aquino, but I appreciate the few that that do exist, right? So I can evaluate the man in his own words when we see him proudly describe his activities in the Phoenix program. And when I see him going around and coming up Aquino and all these 1980s, not just Army base daycares, but civilian daycares across California. Well, it seems like he's doing the same old thing he was doing in Viet fucking Nam, and that was, in his own words, driving around setting up these different Phoenix program cells of psychological operations. So if you apply those same pattern of behavior to what he may be doing with setting up cells of this satanic ritual abuse at daycares, it seems, well, it just seems to come up Aquino. But he describes in various capacities that he met LaVey, or infers that he met LaVey in 1967. He claims he joins the Church of Satan in 1969, March, I believe it is. He also claims he goes to Vietnam in 69. So this is before he goes to that, his Operation Wandering Soul, where he's putting magical rituals into sounds that go scare the shit out of the fucking locals. You know what I mean? But he does admit when questioned that perhaps he was there from the onset, because when the host of that program asked him about the time that him and LaVey had a beef, which I think is questionable, he seemed to have an ongoing relationship with LaVey even after 75 and his departure from the Church of Satan and creation of the Temple of Set, right? But and LaVey's own daughter and son-in-law, joined later in the Temple of Set in the 80s. But nonetheless, it seems the record would show that LaVey and Aquino continued to have relations after that. But it also seems like, in Aquino's own words, he may have been there from the beginning, and not 1969, but rather April of 1966, or before, perhaps even.
Well, we had a great time for the first 10 years of the Church of Satan. We worked very well together. I was basically the next highest initiate to himself in the church. I worked on a national level with him and his wife Diane.
So there we go. We heard it from the man's own mouth, as Anton LaVey would say, from the witch's own mouth, in an interview he did in 1972. So that's interesting. And then we heard last week also, again, Aquino's own words regarding his Phoenix program operations, and some more of those, call center scripts from the Satanic Panic, script to say, oh, well, you believe in Satanic. Oh, you believe in those things? That's Satanic Panic. Oh, McMartin tunnels? You're a moron. Despite the archaeological study being published since 1993, proving there was a tunnel system underneath that school in Manhattan Beach, California. And again, that is an epicenter of activity that folks call out in that script. Oh, McMartin, that never happened. Oh, McMartin, they never had tunnels. So we went over some of those reports last week, but it is that those natures of activities that I think are important when we're considering these psyops to mind more. And Muppet Mikey and gang with his own protocols, procedures, and tactics that he describes. And we'll pull up a couple of those to emphasize that point again here before we jump into introducing Geraldo and some of that business as well. But it is I think it is important to consider the way Aquino continued to approach these matters his entire life, from writing a book about claiming his innocence about Presidio well after those charges were dropped, and by all appearances, it seems due to matters of national security, right? So typical. So, and he continued to perpetrate these same things in exchange with Dave McGowan he got real butthurt about Dave McGowan pointing out a lot of these facts regarding these matters in books and whatnot. So that's interesting. Not only just the diddling and the satanic ritual abuse, but also the program to kill stuff, because as McGowan cites in Program to Kill, Richard Ramirez, who seemingly was trained to be a killer from one of those Project Phoenix program assassins, right? One of Colby's queers. Ramirez's cousin and guardian was one of those folks, assassins in Vietnam for Colby and the Military Assistance Command. So, and then lo and behold, Ramirez gets a one-on-one meeting, according to McGowan's Program to Kill, with LaVey before his onslaught of terror in the early 1980s in Los Angeles, coming from El Paso to San Francisco to Los Angeles, right? El Paso, San Francisco to meet LaVey, Los Angeles for terror. And lo and behold, we'll find another character right there again, Charlie Manson's buddy, Ira Reiner, the LA District Attorney. He's the one who prosecutes that case. So was Ramirez the only one? I think in many of these circumstances that goes without saying, these are a team of individuals, and it's often attributed to the lone nut, no different than Lee Harvey Oswald. And that is part of the psychological operations, because it doesn't make sense in your brain hole, folks. Try to compute that all these things are done by one person, and it's part of the, almost what Schindler would call the big lie, right? No one wants to believe the big lie. And I think folks, ardent Nazis, as professed and proclaimed by folks like Aquino here, right? At least in his activities, wearing that memorabilia and rank on his uniform. Well, it's I think these things go hand in hand. But let's listen to some more of Aquino bullshitness about that landing report. That's another one of those highlights in that script, right, of the Satanic Panic.
The reason that it fizzled out as a fad, finally the FBI did a major study on the whole notion of satanic child abuse and just said this whole thing is a crock, and there's never been one verified instance of it anywhere.
Not one verified instance of it anywhere. Well, there you go. One of those tactics is to completely use the media. That's one of the core tenets of the PSYOPs to mine. We're use the new technology to our advantage, right? We don't have to go out and hand out pamphlets anymore and knock door to door in our psychological operations. He says we can just use the media, and then we see him doing that. Podcasts, emails, books. We see him doing that in the Geraldo Rivera show we're going to watch tonight. But it is these Phoenix program tactics that I think he made his bones on in Vietnam and was employed within leading the charge in back here on the homeland, if you will. Let's hear more about some of those tactics.
Assigned to the PSYOP group that we had over there at the time, the 4th Psychological Operations Group, which handled all of that area of Southeast Asia. And I was particularly assigned as a command and control PSYOP officer in what they called 3 Corps Tactical Zone, which was the area of the country, the quarter of the country around Saigon and over to the Cambodian border. So I spent most of my year there, and a lot of it was either with the Air Force or with various civilian agencies that were functioning in the country, also with some American units and, of course, Special Forces units that were there. And of course, with the Vietnamese and the Montagnards.
So you can see he's kind of all over the place there, right? He's kind of all over the place in Vietnam, describing his activities, traveling different places, setting up these operations. His buddy Bill Colby, his boss, is back there at the State Department in Saigon as a CIA situation. So is his mentor, Edward Lansdale. These folks are important figures in this narrative, Colby specifically, but obviously he learned it from somewhere, and so did Aquino. So a lot of these psychological operations that Aquino would later insert magic into, they were based upon earlier protocols of psychological terror that were developed by Edward Lansdale, right? And all of these folks go back to Project Paperclip and Nazis. Lansdale, Colby, that is, right? So that's where they made their bones, right? Much like Aquino made his bones in this Phoenix program in Vietnam. Viet fucking Nam, that is. So, yes, McGowan's death seems sus. I mean, albeit he was a heavy smoker and worked in construction, probably around asbestos. Lung cancer that aggressive obviously seems very suspect. So we're going to get into those folks here tonight, and we're also going to look at again. So Geraldo Rivera does this massive prime time, back before cable TV, folks, prime time special including all, even that investigator from the Presidios in there. Again, it seems like an objective study into the matter. However, what I'm saying is if you do this huge spectacle, but never any follow-ups, despite all the facts asserted in it, witnesses, law enforcement officers, Maury Terry's in there laying down some facts and proving some of this evidence of how these children objectively can state they're part of rituals when they describe the ritual scene, the environment, the pentagrams, the candles. They draw pictures of the folks' robes and the symbols they see on the robes. So these things are some of the objective evidence we see time after time with the satanic ritual abuse of these children. They're able to describe these details, and Maury Terry emphasizes that in the Geraldo program. We see a lot of Nazi stuff in here too, including folks like Boyd Rice, the guy that invented the industrial rock movement with Genesis P-Orridge, the folks that by their own claims seem to be at the head of this neo-process movement, right? The process being the Process Church of the Final Judgment and Charles Manson and gang. And again, all these folks, not only do they ball wash Aleister Crowley, they ball wash Charles Manson as well. So we'll see that here tonight. But let's take a quick peek here at the Geraldo show, just to get an introduction here before we proceed on to the Patreon side of tonight's program, folks of the interwebs. I appreciate y'all joining me here tonight to get a little GCD, Muppet Mikey style, and these ongoing matters that plague America with the satanic panic that they claim never happened. Again, when they start claiming these things never happened and continue to perpetrate this propaganda, there is a result. There's an obvious outcome, a negative outcome to these matters when it comes to failure to identify the problem and keep perpetrating this obvious propaganda. So one of those results can be seen here. This is actually from The Ultimate Evil, a murder that Maury Terry writes about in The Ultimate Evil, occurred in 1979, presumably in Brooklyn, New York. But the bodies were found drained of their blood in northern New Jersey. Hellish 1979 case goes cold after cops drop ball. This is 2002. 23 years later, 3 police departments, the Jersey one, the NYPD over in Brooklyn, and the New Jersey State Police all said, oops, we thought the other one was investigating it. So you have the murder of a couple, again, gruesome murder, right? From The Ultimate Evil, Maury Terry's book, and no one investigated this for 23 years. And in 2002, when some reporters asked about it, they're like, oh, shoot, we thought the other folks were doing it. So these are the outcome of these matters when you can't address these problems or identify them, and we just ignore cases for 23 years. That seems ridiculous. And these are ongoing things. Like I said, I've watched this one get swept under the rug real fast. Satanic murder. She ate her mom. This happened just in northern Kentucky, across the river from Cincinnati. Not too far south from me right here, about an hour and a half. Well, this disappeared real fast. Right around Christmas time. It was early December when it happened, and by Christmas, it went the way of Houdini. Poof. So these matters continue to be swept under the rug, right? Swept under the rug like Aquino is sweeping that Presidio event under the rug, as we heard last week, right?
The records of the kid's psychiatrist who had been proclaiming this turned out to be just nothing but coaching from the psychiatrist and so on. So the whole thing fizzled out, and the chaplain who had, together with his wife, had immediately put in a claim against the government for $3 million, didn't get it. So his scam came to nothing, and it was exposed. And for anybody who's curious, they can look up a book of mine called Extreme Prejudice, in which it's a huge book because I got all the information down there. I wanted to make sure that everything was out in the open on this. I detailed the entire scam. And of course, also along the way, the history of the whole atmosphere around the country during the witch hunt generally.
The witch hunt generally, because again, it never happened. Don't believe your eyes and ears, folks. None of these children had STDs. They never had any signs of rape, according to doctors, right? That little girl that he's talking about right there, the chaplain, that's the girl's stepfather. The mother, that's the girl's mother. The one that identified him as Mikey. And her teacher, Mr. Gary, took him to her house, took her to his house, and was able to identify, again, that house in intimate detail. So, and Mikey, she identified at the PX. So these are the matters that Aquino says never happened, right? And we see these ongoing things. Again, when you have this national broadcast, you never readdress these things. Well, it's part of the problem, I think, folks. That's part of the magic show. But we see that here with Geraldo Rivera from 1988.
In Satan's underground. Whether a Satan exists is a matter of belief, but we are certain that Satanism exists. To some, it's a religion. To others, it's the practice of evil in the devil's name. It exists, and it's flourishing. Members of our studio audience tonight will attest to that. They are friends and foes of Satanism, devil worshippers and law enforcers, experts and victims. They'll help us understand this force that exalts evil and darkness. We'll be asking why. Why does it exist? And why does it appeal to so many vulnerable people, especially the young? Now, the very young and the impressionable should definitely not be watching this program tonight. This is not a Halloween fable. This is a real-life horror story, and it will give small children bad dreams. As for teenagers and their parents, we hope you are watching, because it's teenagers who are most likely to fall under the spell of this jumble of dark, violent emotions called Satanism, and in some cases, to be driven into committing terrible deeds.
Hey, there we go. So we see a lot of that going on here again tonight with the same characters. We're going to unpack some of that here, folks, of the interwebs. And we see, again, part of this marketing narrative along with Geraldo there was the, blaming things on the music, right? And that was intentionally done through this organization called the PCRA, right? And they focus on folks like Ozzy Osbourne, who sings a song called Mr. Crowley, amongst other thelemic ideas that he perpetrates in his music, right? Nonetheless, it's the folks who finance these things, right? So that was financed by the Beach Boys, Charles Manson's friends. So this effort that incorporated Al Gore's wife, amongst other folks, right? Tipper Gore, right? The wives of other senators, right? They all testified in Congress, but that was all financed by Charles Manson's friends. And again, we see Manson again here tonight, Mr. Processing himself, right? Involved in, all these folks. They all have a salute to Manson like they do Crowley. That's what I mean by ball washing. They venerate these folks, right? And we see, Ozzy Osbourne makes an appearance in that same program.
Rock star Ozzy Osbourne will tell us why he feels he and heavy metal music are getting a bum rap. And to the...
And again, I think that's all, again, part of the magic show, folks. And again, these people are ardent Nazis, meaning whatever their ideals may be, and they tell you, they profess to them, right? It is anything they do, any means to the ends, right? Any means to the ends, right? And we see all this again, Crowleyism, then Charles Manson venerated throughout all these characters with Aquino and all of his underlings, like Nicholas Schreck, Anton LaVey's former son-in-law, former husband of Zena LaVey. We see her involved in this mix too, but they're ardent. They talk about it right here on the show, how big of Nazis they are. And again, Boyd Rice, the industrial rock movement, the mentor to Trent Reznor's Nine Inch Nails. Nine Inch Nails, who recorded their first album in the Tate Polanski house, the Manson murders, in a studio called La Pig, named after the blood written on the wall in the murders.
Along with Hitler, cult leader Charles Manson is today's top satanic celebrity.
Yeah, I chopped up 9 hogs, and I'm going to chop up some more, you I'm going to kill you as many as I can. I'm going to pile you up to the sky.
Responsible for at least 9 ritual murders, Manson is revered by many modern-day devil worshippers who have adopted his philosophy of the mass extermination of those they consider unfit to live.
And that is right there. Those that they feel unfit to live. And we're about to watch Nicholas Schreck describe those same details. And that is the professed theology or philosophy of the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Humanity is the devil, in their words, not mine, their words. That's their philosophy.
Along with Hitler, cult leader Charles Manson is today's top live.
We would like to see most of the human race killed off because it is unworthy. It is unworthy of the gift of life.
Nicholas Schreck visited Charlie at San Quentin, keeps a picture of his hero on his apartment wall, and displays a lock of Manson's hair as if it were a stake.
So there you go, in their own words, folks, not mine. And again, more evidence from CID reports about the Nazism. The Temple of Set's own reading list promotes Mein Kampf. But if you listen to the words from Aquino, he'll tell you, no Nazis here. I don't do Nazi stuff. So it is these matters that we are going to continue to unpack here tonight, folks of the interwebs. And I appreciate you folks commenting here in the chat. Let me see if I can get caught up here. But it's interesting times we live in with all these matters. If we can't, like I said, if we can't identify these problems in America, we can't understand what's plaguing America with these Colby squares, these strange and odd anomalies and impacts they've had on America, like Michael Aquino, like right Phoenix program. You know, it is these matters that if you can't identify the problem, if there are no Satanists, there are no ritual murders, there are no ritual abuse sexually of children, as Michael Aquino says. Pay no attention to your senses, folks, is what Aquino says. So I'm up at Mikey there. You know, well, then we'll never understand. Again, we see those same ideals being perpetrated in well-financed films, documentaries. Satan wants you, right? Where the filmmakers were laughing at victims. I mean, that was 2023. It's pretty preposterous. We see well-financed true crime podcasts, same script. McMartin, Lanning Report. Michelle remembers. Oh, you believe in McMartin tunnels? You're a moron. You know, it's the same script every time, folks. And again, these are the psyops to mind war and the professed nature of what is intended. We went over 2 weeks back on how Aquino and LaVey literally communicate that they hope folks are battling in semantics. This is their professed protocol, so to speak. Again, their words, not mine. So we'll obviously be going over, again, laying the foundation more of these matters, but unpacking more, again, building upon last week, and then future episodes here, future volumes of the anatomy of satanic panic will continue to build upon these that we're discussing tonight, folks of the interwebs. And I do appreciate you joining me here to get a little GCD, and I hope you folks can join me over on the Patreon side, and the rest of us folks of the interwebs over there, to discuss these matters even further and unpack what's going on here regarding these satanic panic and the other ritual abuse and ritual homicide aspects of these things, right? The ongoing nature, and again, we're just going to be reviewing tonight more of Aquino's own words and more of those same psychological operations that seem to continue to impact these matters. Because as we went over last week, there was Army investigations in numerous locations right now, numerous daycare centers across America, which is the same pattern from back in 1988 when that was filmed. So that Geraldo was done while they're investigating the Presidio still, right? This guy has the balls to go out on national TV like that. That's what I'm saying. He knows he's supported. He's got top cover, national security, if you will. But it is these matters that seem to be ongoing, because when you have 15 daycare centers across America simultaneously at that same time in the 80s at Army daycare centers, same problems, right? Every part of America, you know, that's ongoing today. You mean to tell me that any of this has been resolved? I doubt it. So I doubt it. And why wouldn't it be anyway? You can't trust a Nazi. You certainly can't trust them to be accountable, and certainly not for themselves. So the on that note, folks of the interwebs, again, thanks for joining me to get a little GCD. And if you see this broadcast in the future, pop on over to Patreon. Join us over there for the rest of this discussion. And those folks join me here tonight, I'll see you over there in a few minutes for the rest of this conversation. And on that note, catch you next time, folks.
Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, brunch rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo coats haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret society, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, brunch rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo coats haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Boom!